so everybody knows we are now recording. And I'm gonna also shut off the chime for people coming in the room. Mm-hmm. That way we're not. And now I will let you all have the control also to unmute. Tshaka and Tolu, you have I'll actually go ahead. Bill, are you sticking around? Just give me a thumbs up if you're staying for the whole thing. Okay, now I'm gonna make you a co-host as well. That way you can help out. Yay, okay. All right. It is 11:01, so I'm gonna go ahead and say hi, everyone. My name is Mighty Mike McGee. I am the Secretary of the Board for Poetry Center San Jose, and it is with great pride, great excitement that I get to introduce my dear friend for this really incredible project. But before I do that, I would like to point out a couple of things. One, we need questions, all right? We need questions in the chat. So please, if you have ideas, questions, anything throughout this entire event, please put them in the chat so that Tshaka can ask those questions, so that Tolu can ask those questions of Tshaka, what have you. Poetry Center San Jose is a nonprofit based here in San Jose, California. We are nowhere near the Mexican border. We are actually in the southern tip of the Bay Area. Most people assume that we are San Diego with a different name, and that is not true. Poetry Center San Jose has been around since 1978, I believe. Is it 78, Bill? I think it's 78. It's a very old organization full of old people. And but our purpose in this organization is to spread poetry and literature throughout all of San Jose and into the greater South Bay area. And we have so many programs, so many projects that we are involved with right now. Namely, at this point, we are working on the San Jose Poetry Festival, which will be happening September 11th through the 19th. You can get all the information about every event we're doing, including events like Beautiful Black Books, at pcsj.org. pcsj.org, Poetry Center San Jose. I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat right now so that folks can click on that link and then save it in their bookmarks. I'm trying to use as many phrases from the early aughts as possible right now. So please go to that www and make sure you click on that link there. I'm gonna go ahead and stop talking now. And I'm gonna pass it on to my dear friend, Mr. Tshaka Campbell.
Thank you so much, Mike, for that fantastic introduction. Welcome everyone who is with us right now and who will be with us going into the program. Please keep your eye on the chat. We'll throw links in there as we go through, but I'm so excited to talk about this project and then parlay into our wonderful and special guest. But just to give you guys a little bit of background behind some Beautiful Black Books, and it's going to be a part of, as Mike said, there are a number of programs we're doing with Poetry Center San Jose. This one specifically is a reoccurring program where we're looking to feature Black writers in conversation followed by a Q&A. That's the sort of the words on the paper that do the description. But for me, this is really about sharing the world and wealth of artists and authors out in our universe that don't always get the same amount of play. But in this specific sort of area of concentration, we want to be able to promote, to support, to uplift, to hug, to wrap our hands around our Black writers and give them a platform to speak about what the work that they do, but also to give us a little insight into who they are as individuals. So that's sort of my goal. This is the second installment of the program. We're a growing program. I'm super excited about it, about where it is now and where it's going to be. But without further ado, I want to introduce our second guest. Now, I'm going to give you Tolu's sort of, we sometimes say this is your government name. I'm going to give her government bio, right? And then we're going to talk about who, we're going to talk about the real of Tolu. So Tolu is an author of Locating Strong Women, a Nigerian British poet, playwright, and educator. Her work has been published nationally and internationally. She was shortlisted for the 2018 White Review Poetry Prize and has performed widely, including at the Cheltenham Literature Festival, the Stanza International Poetry Festival, Lagos International Poetry Festival, and Poetry Africa. She's the founder of Home Sessions, a poetry development program for Black poets. She's created and led workshops at universities, youth centers, art organizations, schools, et cetera, et cetera. And for more information, we'll put this in the chat as well. It's Tolu Agbelusi .com, and we'll put that in the chat. So that's the government. Now let me tell you the real. All right. So I moved back to England. God, I don't even remember. This is probably 2008, 2009. It started to sort of go back into sort of the poetry. Well, I wouldn't even say back into, because when I lived in England, I wasn't doing poetry. And you frequent your places, and I think it might have been at Cat Francoise in that. I think it was. What was it? For word, what was the name?
Word for word, was that?
Word for word. Yes. Word for word. And I remember sitting there, and this presence came on stage and started speaking, and I was like, and she's probably going to get mad at this because probably people have made this made this this comparison many times. But Maya Angelou, I was just like, how is she on stage? So that was my first thought, and then as quick as that came, I was completely transported, not by just her words, by just, again, the presence, the warmth that she gave on stage, the very sort of, what's the word I can use? It's deliberate, very deliberate sort of approach to her work. And I was completely impressed by that. And then I got to talk to her. And then I got to hang out with her. And then, we worked on a project here and there together, and it just solidified everything for me. This young lady is a beautiful soul, a beautiful heart, inside and out. And I am so pleased that I can share her with my friends, with my family, with my community, through Beautiful Black Books. So that there is my little bio. For this.
Thank you.
Of course. So, we'll jump in, Tolu, but it's gonna be, me, it's gonna be random, right? We're gonna jump from one thing to the other, because I want to sort of build the legend that is Tolu for folks, okay? So yes, we read in the government bio, right? You're a writer, you're a performer, an educator, a playwright. What does that mean to you, right? If you had to give the 40-second elevator pitch of who you are, as it relates to you as an individual and to your art, what would you say? How would you answer that?
I'd say I tell stories that aim to shake. Actually, there's something you always used to say. That thing about making people see different.
Yes,
right?
Yes. Agitate.
So,
yes.
So I tell stories to provoke people into seeing differently, mostly about how do we live our true lives without performing ourselves. And with this book, that's obviously very much about womanhood. But I think I do that generally because that's always a question that I'm asking, especially in the current day world. So my pitch would be I write things, stories, I push people into thinking differently, I hope.
Yes, I love that. I love that. So, that being said, in terms of pushing folks to think differently, sort of, this is a two-part question. One is sort of, how do you do that, right? In this world where, you know, um, um, the commodity is sort of what it seems like everything is pushing into, and then also the fear associated with that, right? How do you manage the aspect of sort of, I'm going to put my work, especially as poets, right? You're putting your work out there, and intentionally trying to push people in a different direction.
I mean, I think I've always been somebody who operates on the fringes of things. So that when it comes to my work, it might be scary, but it's just what it is. That this is my voice, these are the things that I have to say, and this is what I'm going to put out. So there were obviously early on issues with that, with regards to people not being able to put you in any boxes. And because people can't put you in boxes, then they sideline you. And knowing that that is their problem and not mine. If I have something to say, then I'll say it. And also, I mean, as you know, you write, you come, you perform, you've never met some of the people in your audience before, and then they start to talk to you after and make connections to your work that you never have considered. And that is always motivated, because then you're not just writing for the voice in your head, that there's somebody else who this is affecting. And that for me is a motivating thing. But this is also, in terms of pushing other people, it might be other people, but you're also pushing yourself, because what is poetry if we're not asking questions, right? So I'm writing to figure things out myself. So I want to ask those questions. And if I'm being honest enough with myself, then somewhere along the line, somebody else will connect with that question that I'm asking.
Yeah, I love that. Writing to figure out things yourself. That's I love that. I'm writing that down. Circle C. I'm copywriting that, just so you know. So you guys are hearing some of these answers from Toulouse, and as I said in my last Instagram post, she's a badass. And with that, I have been, I secretly stalk you. Well, it's not secret anymore because I just told everybody. But one of the things that I see is this is martial arts. And so I am so interested in how that came about, sort of, and I've studied it myself, but I would love to know sort of, what was the impetus to get into that, and then what has that done for you?
I was always interested, but I am the only girl between two boys. And so my father was very early on like, no, you're not fighting. Nobody's going to, you're not just going to put yourself out there for someone to deck your face. So the first thing I did when I got to university was sign up for kickboxing, because now I could make my own decisions, right? I loved it. I mean, it was daunting because many times there were only two girls in the classes. I think I started with kickboxing, but there was something freeing about knowing what to do with my body. There was also something scary about being in a class where people were throwing themselves in a particular way you couldn't do that, and then learning how to. And I'm not a gym person, I like to hit things. I'm calm as a person, so I figure maybe for the exercise part of me, I need to be not so calm. So yeah, kickboxing, and then it became capoeira, and then I was living somewhere that didn't have capoeira, so I did taekwondo, a little too square for me, but cool. It was there, and then I came back to capoeira, and then Muay Thai and jiu-jitsu, and now I just do jiu-jitsu.
Wow.
And in terms of what that does, it's a freeing thing after work. When I go to jiu-jitsu, especially before the world closed down, but even now, but especially then, after work, when I go to jiu-jitsu, to be able to I don't have to try to disconnect myself from work when I am on the floor. My only preoccupations are, you're not going to choke me. I might choke you.
That may happen at work too, but
you know, that may happen at work, but it's different. Here, this is what we're here for. Right. You know? So it's again freeing to know what to do with my body. Right. It's also play, especially with jiu-jitsu, because it's very much child's play, dangerous child's play, but it's very much play, and you're just kind of, especially when you're with people who aren't about the ego, who are just trying to figure the thing out. So I like a thing. It's like a good book. If you're in a really good book, you lose yourself in it. You don't think about anything else. And I think most of us who do other jobs apart from writing, you're using your brain all day, so that when you come out of it, you need something to actually take you out. Otherwise, you still tapping into whatever it was that you were doing. So I feel like martial arts does that for me. And it's also good to know that if my brain needed to kick into gear to choke somebody at some point, I might know how to do it.
If it just happens to be, I need to choke somebody up, I know how to do it. Got it. Wonderful. I think so. You should add a bodyguard to your list of attributes there. I had no idea it spans so many disciplines, but that's fantastic. But and you know, as you were talking about it, I know, you know, and when you said Taekwondo, because I know sometimes that's like it's very structured, you know, and then you said, you know, what you're doing now is much more, it's much more freeing, it's much more flexible. Like, does any of that bleed into your work?
I think it does in terms of analogies, and it's weird you mentioned, I didn't think you were going to mention martial arts tonight, but when I was thinking about—
I'm a go there.
When I was thinking about like my work and strength, and this book in particular in strength, and maybe certain reactions to it so far, and when people think about strength as this thing that has to be solid all the time. But when you think about strength, or about lots of martial arts, sometimes when somebody's coming for you, the best thing to do is to go where they're pushing you to, because that then gives you leverage to do what you actually want to do whilst they think they've won. Yeah. And so for me, especially for this book, it's a different way of, it's a perfect analogy for looking at strength in a way that doesn't say it's strength versus vulnerability. It's vulnerability as a part of strength. So it gives me that. And I think it just also, occasionally it helps me work things out. In terms of if something has been racking my mind, especially, you know how it is, you're always looking for analogies for things. And then somebody touches you in a particular way and you think, oh, the way they did that thing actually flows into. So not intentionally, but there are times that it comes into my work in that way.
It's all connected, right? The whole universe is all connected, especially as we do this work, and trying to evolve subjects, right? You've got to pull in from all over the place.
Everywhere.
Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. So I want to go back a little bit, right? Just go, you know, because, you know, I met you when I met you, but, you know,
I met you before that. Or at least I knew you before that.
Yeah. Really? You know,
I was in the audience when you proposed. We weren't talking yet.
Oh.
And
okay.
Yes.
Okay. So yes. Wow. Okay. Well, you know, I'm getting old. I had my ginkgo biloba. But yes. Okay. So we're gonna go back before that then. Then, you know, what, you know, if you think about, you know, I mean, I don't know what age this was, you know, 5-year-old Tolu or 6-year-old Tolu. What's like your earliest memory of art? and it doesn't have to be poetry, it could be anything, but that first time that you realized, here's this thing to be that you classified as art in whatever definition you had of art at the time.
One of my uncles used to sculpt things. And as you asked the question, I'm remembering some busts that he did for some project, and I think that's probably my earliest recall, of art that was close and around me. Other than that, it would probably be music.
Okay, and how's that? How did that come in, and how does that play into your sort of your memories of art?
Probably not at the time, but as an older person thinking back of some of the songs that stuck, and some of them I don't even remember the full thing. There's a song that was about Winnie Mandela, for example, or around the whole apartheid thing. I still remember parts of it now. And for me, it's just, in terms of looking at it as art, the power of those things at the time, to move one across the continent, two across the world, and be part of something, which was, I guess, some of the initial unconscious inklings of this thing doesn't exist just for the sake of it.
Right.
It exists to move something, which I guess is what we're doing, right?
Right, that's what we're trying to do, right? Absolutely. So with that being said, you mentioned family and your uncle and such. What do they think? What do they think about your successes now? Because I mean, they're two different. You've got the success in sort of your professional field, and then the success in your artistic world. How involved are they with that, and what are their thoughts about it?
I think now they're proud. Now they see it a little bit better than they did initially.
You're just going out. Why are you going out hanging out at night?
It was difficult to explain why this thing wasn't just some little hobby, or why I might be talking about wanting to leave my job. Because they were like, yeah, but you're good at it. And I was like, yeah, but I'm good at the other thing too. And I think it's always a fear, because clearly they want their children to be secure and they're getting old and all of those type of things. And I have to put it down to that. But I think that the change started coming with that project we worked on together. The last one, especially the play, when the play came out the first time, I think that they were in the audience that night. And it's one thing for you to talk about something. It's a whole nother thing for you to be there and to see the reaction of all of these people to this thing. And then even not understanding it, like, why do you have to take time off for a whole month to rehearse for that? Like, because it's a whole play. And there are actors that I need to read with.
It's a real thing.
It's a real thing. So, but even in not understanding the process, but seeing the end thing, seeing people talking about it, not just, again, as some piece of art or entertainment that they just saw, but talking about how it linked back to their lives, I think they started to get a better understanding of what it could do. And then obviously I produced as well. So all of the heartache that goes into trying to find the money, trying to deal with people, and them seeing that. And my father being like, what can I help with? Because I don't like, you're not looking too great right now. So one way or another, they kind of just got dragged in. And by the time the book came, my father opened an Instagram account, because the first event I did for the book was on Instagram, and he wanted to be part of it. So it's a nice arc. they still don't understand everything, but I think they support it more. And I think they, especially because there's now been so much over the years, it's not just a little thing there, a little thing here.
Right.
So between the poetry and the teaching and the playwriting, they understand, okay, there's a bigger sphere of stuff going on, and that maybe it's time we trust her to do
trust
her
us. Yeah.
thing. And just make comments now and again. You know?
Tweet that. Why you do that over there? Do this. Yeah. No, I get it. It's so funny, and I don't know. Hearing you tell that story just reminds me of sort of my experience, and I'm sure other folks on the phone who are artists, but it's just on the Zoom rather. But there's this thing I think sometimes with parents, until you can tell them all the time. I used to tell my dad all the time, I'm going to a gig, I'm doing this, and nothing. And then one day he said, I bumped into so-and-so, and they said you were good at this reading. How come you never told me you did this poetry thing? Like, what are you talking about? You know, but there's something about the tangible, right? Actually seeing it, them seeing it in action, or actually hearing it from someone else. For some reason, it then becomes real, and it's almost then another gear shift for them to get into it. So that's amazing. I never thought of it in that sense, in the sense that, you know, I think that's parents, right? That's how they, like you said, they want the best for their children. So, you know, always trying to have that guardrail up for them. But it's a great you sort of went into that, because I did want to talk about the project we did do together, and the home project. And there's two aspects to this I want to dig into. The first part is sort of the struggle in starting it in the first place. And what I mean by that is community, right? The community. And then the second part of the question is sort of the actual producing of it, and sort of how that came about, how rewarding and challenging it was. And I know that's a broad question. Part of it is because I want to squeeze in there this part, because I was around, you know, when the idea was noodling, and, you know, the challenges that you were having when you were sort of putting this idea on, and I think you touched on it earlier, in the sense of, you know, putting this idea out there, and trying to elicit support from the community, and folks either being supportive, or, you know, whether in that time they thought it was too early for you to do something. So I want to talk a little bit about community and how you were able to push through that part of it, because, you know, I'm not saying, you know, let's put it this way. I don't know if everybody was like, yeah, I'm behind you 100%. Let's go do this thing. And so I know that was part of a challenge, and I saw it as well. So talk to me a little bit about how you pushed through that.
Stubbornness. It's a huge part of it, but also the why it came about. Yes, I wanted to do something, but there's a part of me sometimes that thinks, okay, but if the organizations who would normally be in charge of, you know, producing those type of things had allowed me the space to come in and do that, then would that program have happened as it did? Probably not. So in as much as I wanted to do that project because it challenged what people normally saw in terms of poetry projects, you know, if there's art and there's poetry, the poetry is responding to the art. And I told all the artists, no, the art will respond to the poetry. And that was the dance, that was the animation, that was the illustration. Everything had to respond to the poetry. And then there was the filming stuff. That was the first time I properly sat down. I was like, no, I'm filming the thing. I learned how to edit from some stuff I was doing at work. So that was my, you know, got some stuff edited with somebody else, did the other things myself. But it was kind of like, I can do these things. And people keep telling me I can't without giving me an opportunity. So I'm just going to go out and do my own thing. And you may remember, like, we had all met and I got you all together and I said, this is my idea, this is what I want us to do. And it was cool for a while. And then, you know, people started to drop off for different reasons. And even the people, for the most part, I mean, you were the only one who stayed from the beginning till the end, in many ways. Even people who supported me, I felt had doubts that I could do it. They thought I was taking on something too big. But whoever knows me well knows I don't take on things I can't do. So even if it seems big, I will do whatever I can do to do it and do it properly. I don't do things by half. I don't believe in that. So it was about finding my own community as I went along and trying to understand that if somebody doesn't want to be there, then it's okay. I can let them go and there'll be somebody else. And that was great to understand that in this project, because when, like, you guys started as my first cohort of poets, and then it was around that time that you moved to the States. And it was like, are you going to do it or you not? And you had to speak to your wife and it was cool to stay. And then there were other things. And then there were other issues. And I thought, okay, so who else can? And then that came up. And then it became, how do you do the funding? I'd never applied for a funding app. And there was a particular event, a huge exhibition at the South Bank at the time at the bottom. And I remember going to that exhibition and looking at the board of sponsors to see and making notes, and going to other exhibitions and looking at the board of sponsors. And then I started cold calling people to see who would have a meeting with me. And some people did. So Counterpoint Arts, who ended up being a huge supporter from the beginning to the end as well, were sponsors of that first exhibition that I went to at the South Bank. And I remember they put me in touch with somebody at the Arts Council. And that was how the first, that person was able to work with me on the first grant. In the end, I think we got 3 grants up to the tour stage for the play. But I was also knocked back several times in between that, you know. So the production was more, something needs to happen. So I'm going to research the hell, as I would do at work. I'm going to research the hell out of whatever it is that I need to do. And then I'm going to make it happen. And if there are people I can call to do stuff, then I'll call them. And if for whatever reason, whoever I think can do it can't do it, I will learn how to do it myself. And some of that, some of the criticism I got from certain people in the community was that I was wearing too many hats. And I thought, well, if somebody else picked it up, then I wouldn't have to. You know, it's not necessarily that I want to be producing and acting and one of the writers. Like the whole play thing was brilliant, because yes, I'd written before, yes, I'd done one-woman things before, but it was my first multi-hander. And then to be in it with real actors for the final thing. And knowing that I couldn't always just have my head on, this is the script. You know, if the stage guy was messing up and thinking, I'm paying you money, you better do something. You better do something.
You've got a half an hour to block this thing out.
You know, so your head was always somewhere else. So it was difficult. I'm not going to pretend it was easy, but I think it was more a case of, I've come up with this thing. This is how I want it to be. And I believe it's possible. So I'm going to push. And luckily, as we went along, I got people around me who were great at assisting. I mean, you, Jamelia, who's on the call right now, Shirley May in Manchester, who helped me speak to Contact Theatre. They were actually the first venue where we trialed it out. Kat didn't go on with the show, but Kat was the one who gave me the contact at Rich Mix, which was where we previewed the play properly for the first time. Right. So there were people who were willing to throw little things in. But the funny thing, and we mentioned community and people being sidelined, was that afterwards, when the play did well, there were people who said, oh, now the play has done well. So you need to decide whether you want to be a playwright or a poet. because, you know, people will get confused. I'm like, what are they getting confused about? They didn't see me when I was a poet. If they don't want to see me now, like, you know, and I remember I was at a Callaloo week, Writers Week in 2016, and the Vivi Francis was in charge of my group. And I remember her saying, look, you don't worry about the audience. Your audience will find you. Your people will find you. And that has generally been my experience. That has been my experience with this book. That has been my experience with the play. In the end, people will come. You just do whatever it is that you need to do and be genuine with it. And I try to do that and believe that whoever is left around me is supposed to be there. And I shouldn't force it, because if I have to force you to be there, then you weren't supposed to be there in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, that authenticity, that integrity, that I think you build into your work. And I just think generally, if you have that integrity out there, folks read it, right? They see that and they will be attracted to it. Yeah, on a personal note, you know, seeing the start of that project, the home project, and I'll give you a chance to kind of give a, you know, a 2-3 minute synopsis of it for folks who haven't seen it. But you know, before you do that, I don't want to miss the opportunity to say that, you know, being there in the South Bank, what was it, the South Bank library, when you first started talking about, you know, putting this together, and then seeing where it ended up, I am so incredibly proud and in awe of what you put together, because I knew part of the struggles in the beginning, and you know, we shared some of the struggles during, but then I remember being, and you know, this was probably, I don't know, 2/3 of the way through. And so I remember, like, if this was the struggles at 2/3 of the way through, God, I can't imagine what you ended up with, which was such an amazing sort of collaboration and of different experiences, I felt in that. But give the audience a little bit of a synopsis of what that home project was.
It was an exploration of what home is in the context of constant displacement. I think is the straightest way to describe it, and working that out through poetry collaborations with other art forms. And a lot of that started with conversations between myself and other poets, especially because that was one of the summers where there were so much police brutality things happening stateside. So that fed its way in. But also in the UK, there were a lot of things happening. And so I interviewed people around the country about different things. And it's really weird because all those interviews started 2014, 2015. The Windrush scandal broke in the UK in 2018. And I remember when it broke, some of the people who saw the play in 2016 contacted me to say, oh my gosh, we were talking about those things. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, because those things were already happening. Yeah. So that when the play came around again in 2018 and 2019, it now felt like we were talking about the Windrush scandal, although, and we changed a few things, or added a few things, I should say. But it just kind of dovetailed in, because the concept is one that has always been there, those questions about what is home when you're always displaced. How do you make it up? Who does it become, or what does it become in those instances?
Yeah, it's such an amazing topic, and when you started the topic, I got the gravity of it. It wasn't until I then, you know, picked up and moved back to the stateside that it took on a whole different flavor for me, right? The displacement and that main question of, you know, what or where do you call home? You know, and with me having moved so many different places, and then you throw a family into it, it then takes on a different, right? Because for me, home was home. I would always say, as long as I can, you know, if it ever got bad, I'd eat franks and beans, and I could make it happen, right? But now you're responsible. So home becomes this other thing.
Yeah, especially that moment, that period when you were, you know, in different countries.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then I was watching, and I was watching, I don't know if they have this in England, Queer Eye.
For the straight guy?
Yes, yeah. And they go around and they, and they go to different places and sort of reshape people's lives. And I remember one of the episodes, the gentleman was walking, I think his name is Kay, and the shirt said, son of an immigrant, and I was just dumbfounded because this idea that, folks are celebrating the fact home and the necessity to make that connection in all different ways. And when I first moved to this country, it was all about, it's assimilation, right? As much as you can kind of be American, be something else, and not to call that, even though you had a home somewhere else. So it just to say that that topic alone is is so powerful, and you approached it and gave it such a fantastic narrative. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So I want to start getting into the book, and we're going to give you some time to kind of share some of the poems in there. But before we go in there, there's, let me give it away, but there's so many lines and parts of this book that I fell in love with. But before I get there, when you thought about putting this together, what was your process? You've written before, you've done all this other stuff. Now you're saying, okay, I want to sit down. If that's even the case, it might not have been, I'm going to sit down and do this work. How did that happen?
I mean, I'd been wanting to put together a book for the longest time. I'm very happy I did not do it when I wanted to do it at first. Because I would probably have regretted a lot of whatever I would have put down. But I had this idea. It was always, all my ideas were something to do with womanhood or around womanhood, and the lives of women. I just didn't know what exactly it was that I wanted to write. And at the stage where I thought, maybe around 2016, where I thought, okay, I'm ready. I was at the Callaloo Writers Week in Oxford, and I'm not sure what I was doing when this title came to me, and I wrote it down. But as soon as the title came, everything else started to flow easier. I knew what didn't belong in this hodgepodge of things that I had put together. I knew to some extent what I had to fill in, what gaps I then had to fill in. And so I started working towards it and speaking to people to see what would happen. And it's I mean, I believe in God orchestrating things. So I'm gonna look at it that way. There was an event I went to in 2016, and my current publisher, the lady who owns my current publisher, was there. She was gonna be on a panel. I was closing up the panel with a poetry thing. And I'd never met her before, but you check out everybody on the panel for.
Of course.
So I did. I was like, oh, publisher, I want to speak to her. And then I looked and I was like, oh, they don't publish poetry. Okay, I'll still say hi, but it's not going to be any use to me. And it's weird because I did the performance and we finished. And then she came to speak to me before I went to speak to her. And she was like, we don't publish poetry, but I'll publish you.
Nice.
And I was like, oh, okay. So that was kind of exciting. And then we got talking. But after we got talking, and I think I showed up with a book, like a little book of what I had already. And she was impressed because she was like, some people show up to these meetings and they have nothing. They're just having discussions. So I'm already impressed that you've done whatever. But then she started having because they didn't do poetry, she was like, I really like your work. And as much as I want to publish you, I don't know if we'll be doing you any justice if I published you, because I don't know that we can get it out in the way that it needs to go. So where do you want to be published? I will contact them for you. And that was strange to me because I'm like, not that this is poetry, not that this thing is going to make you a bag, but you're kind of giving away. But whatever, she contacted people for me. Months after, when I had forgotten, I got emails from her to say, oh, I met this person's agent and I spoke to you about them. Is it okay if I send them your email? And it was just a different way of doing things. It was a very authentic way of doing things. Kind of like, even if she's not going to publish, she wants to see my work in the world and she wants the best for it.
Yeah.
And there was something about that I took to. And so later on, when they came up with this 20 in 20 project, which my book is published as part of, which Jacaranda Books published 20 different books by Black authors in 2020, and 5 of those were poets. I submitted like everybody else submitted, didn't hear back when I thought it was time to hear back. I'd submitted my book to other things by then, because I just thought, well, I guess it's not happening. And then I got it. And so I had to call the other people and say, oh, I'm going to remove my book from the submission process because I've got it with these people. And then most of the stuff was together then. I had a reader who's a poet who I love, Vangile Gansho in South Africa. And I love her because she's honest with me.
That's so needed. That is so needed.
And she gave really good commentary on lots of stuff, and so that helped me to recalibrate. So I came back, did my stuff, submitted again. There were a couple. There was somebody I wanted to edit my work with regards to the options I was given. So I made sure that person edited my work because there were suggestions that somebody else could, and I said no. So I think by that stage, you're getting older as well. You're learning how to fight for yourself a little bit more.
Right. Yes.
And all those years of going to workshops and having people edit you and learning how people edit and knowing that some people edit you just to break you down.
Yes.
And knowing that I wanted no part in that, and other people edit just for the form of it, and again, I didn't want that. I want somebody who sees the best in me and therefore sees the best in my work. So Jacob Samlerose was the editor, and he was brilliant. Like he pushed me.
Yeah.
And by this time we're in lockdown, so we're having long, like 3-4 hour conversations over the phone to talk about this thing, and going back and doing the work and coming back. And sometimes I remember I'd have been saying, I tried that thing you said, and look, I showed you, I tried it.
Right.
So we're just going to move to the next. He's like, yeah, I'm not finished.
That's nice for you. However,
so there were some of those moments, but sometimes when somebody's describing something to you, like there were times when he would describe a vision of my poem, like if this thing does what it's supposed to do,
right?
The sun is going to come down and stay for the next 1 week in England, and you want that.
Right.
So he gave me a vision that I couldn't, not if I wanted the best for myself, that I couldn't turn down. And that kind of spurred me along to work. And I feel like the best teachers, the best editors also teach you how to do that. And since I do workshops sometimes and I mentor sometimes, those things were lessons, not just in how to put the book together, but also in helping other people to do those things. But yeah, eventually we came up together with what was supposed to be in it, based on the title, what gaps needed to be filled. And I had written a poem, the Locating Strong Woman poem in the book, as an ekphrastic poem based on the Carrie Mae Wims picture, which is the cover picture. And I was speaking to the publisher to say, oh yeah, I would like that pic, but I doubt we'll ever get the rights to it. And she goes, which pic? Send it to, so I sent, she goes, yeah, we'll try. If we don't, then we'll go to a different option. And it took forever because although Carrie Mae Wim said, yes, I think the gallery had a bunch of requirements and it took a while, but it got sorted out. And so it became the cover. So everything kind of fit into place in its own time.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's fantastic. That is a lesson in moonshot thinking, right? It's sort of, don't limit yourself to what you can see. You know, a lot of people would have said, I'm not even going to offer up that picture because, you know, it's known or it belongs to, you know, it's on this other scale. But, you know, but just opening up to say, look, go for it, right? And I see that it's just in our conversation, it's repeated in everything that you're talking about. Like,
I mean, and even with, there was one of the poems, Cento, which is a cento. It has parts of lots of people's work. And I needed something from one of Lucille Clifton's poems. And I had gotten rights for other things. And the person who deals with the rights, right. It was funny. And because I was using it in not as it was as a cento, so I'm obviously breaking it out of its usual context based on other things he had said before. I knew it was going to be an issue. So I had gone through a different publisher who I felt also had rights because they were the first ones to publish it. But the whole thing was taking time. And I think although I'd gotten in touch with them maybe 2 months before, by the time I had a week left to my deadline, I hadn't heard back. And I remember going on LinkedIn and I found Lucille Clifton's daughter
right.
on LinkedIn, as you do. And I thought, okay, they've been trying to get me to do LinkedIn Prime for ages. So this is the day I do the trial. So I signed up to the trial and I remember emailing her to say, I'm really sorry if this is improper, but I literally have a week left and I really need this line from your mother's poem. And these people are not responding to me. Can you give me whatever it is? And she was lovely. She got back to me the next day. She said in the first instance, this is who I should contact. So she gave me somebody higher up in the company. They contacted me the next day.
As they would.
You know, everything started moving. And then in the end, it wasn't even them. It was the guy I had dealt with in the other company before. And at the stage when he started trying to get funny, I said, well, I've already spoken with.
There you go.
So he said, okay, fine. This is what you need to pay for it. So I'm like, this was for me a lesson in sometimes just push and see what happens.
To think big. I love it. And I want to touch really quickly, just for folks that haven't gone through sort of the editor process or have someone, you know, that is as diligent, let's say, with the process. Give us an example of what one of the things you were pushing back. You know, he said he pushed you. You know, what does that mean? You know, because there's a lot of folks who say, I don't even want to deal with it. I'm going to self-publish so I can do it myself. And I think there's there's probably pros to that. There's definitely some cons with it. But give us an example of what that, of kind of a push-pull thing.
I mean, 2 poems come to mind. One of them, which I'm going to read tonight, was a poem actually that started doing the home sessions thing. I think the very first session that me, you, and the others had, I had said, write something about a place that feels like home that isn't your first home or something like that. And that was where that poem had started. And I had changed it a few times, but there was just something that wasn't clicking about it. But I thought I had got it right. I sincerely did. And I remember, as you do, and I remember Jacob read it and said, there's something that is still not there. There's all this exposition that maybe isn't just what you want to say. So think about this as a poem in 3 parts and go off and do that. And when I went back to it, just from the conversation with him, different other things started to pop up as to the why of this thing. And so I thought I won't do 3 parts, I'll do 2. And so I started to mess around with it. And it became something wholly different and better than what it was before. Then there's another poem called Wake Up. It's called, what is it called in the book? I'm running out of ways to fight for you. I think, frankly, I'm running out of ways to fight for you.
Yes.
But there's a film on my website called Wake Up, and that is the genesis of that poem. So it was a poem that went on the poetry film circuit for a little while, and it was fine. But I remember going to a workshop in 2016, and it was Vivey at the time who said, this is a really good poem, lovely, strong imagery, but you don't seem to know when you've said something good that you need to let breathe, because you just passed to something else.
Yeah.
So why don't you just take that line, which was the last line of the initial poem, I think, and start again. Don't look at the old thing. Whatever is meant to come back will come back.
Right.
So I then did another version. And that was good enough to be invited to read at the closing ceremony for the Callaloo thing. So I was like, hey, cool.
Right.
But then looking at it again, especially in the context of the book, I'm like, okay, I still need to make some more changes. And I did. And Jacob pushed me to think again as to why I was doing certain things. So I did that. And then when we got to the stage where I thought it was over, and he said, oh, I think this is the best version of this poem I've ever seen. But have you ever written a sestina? And I'm like, we have 2 days. We have 2 days to the deadline. I am not writing a sestina.
Love it.
Right? And he just kept pushing. So I tried. That was the one where I said I tried and it just didn't work out.
Right.
And he said, no, go again. And I still remember sitting in a bin bag in my sitting room. I think I sat here all night till about 7 a.m. just to get it. But I got it right. And I would never have done it if he didn't say, you tried. I mean, you may have not gotten there, but you almost got there the first time. So go again. So for me, that's a poem that's had like 3 lives, 3 very different lives. One thing does not look like the last thing,
right.
But somebody else had to see it for me to understand that that was a possibility.
To experience it. Yeah. So you hear guys out there, you're writing, you need someone who is honest and someone who will push you, because yeah, it's obvious why, because, but you need folks around you that are going to be genuine. You touched on this, when we talk about sort of the why of this thing. There's a line that on one of the poems, right? Frankly, I'm running out of ways to fight for you. And the line is, there's a part in it that says, as if he wasn't a bed of nails your love laid on. Goes on to just some wonderful, and then it ends with, I tried, right? There's that one. There's on the razor of an esophagus, ends with, isn't this what you wanted? Your name on every tongue. Right. So, when I read through these, and there's these there's so many things that pull at me differently as a man, as a male, as a Black male, that pulls at me differently. It makes me look at things, but just look at things differently. let's put it that way. What was your the sort of the central theme of this book? You talked about strength, you talked about womanhood, but the theme in the collection of the poems, what was the theme, and who are they specifically aimed at, if there is a specificity to it?
I don't know. I don't want to say it's specifically aimed at anyone. I think it's for women, in the sense that I wanted it to be a deconstruction and a reconstruction of strength. An opportunity to look at what it is again, and to find it in the quiet places where you don't normally construe strength, because sometimes that is exactly where it is. You just don't see it for yourself. But I think it's also for others who are in relationship with you. And in relationship, I don't mean romantic relationship necessarily, whether it's romantic, whether it's platonic. It's for others to also look at it and say, okay, maybe I should have seen that in something that I was in that I didn't see. Maybe I can interact differently. Maybe I can say this differently because of the impact that it has. But it's also a call to freedom to allow yourself to be vulnerable when you need to be, and accepting that as a strength in itself.
That's amazing. We've talked, and this is my last question before we're going to let you kind of share some of your beautiful work with us. You know, I think on many occasions, I remember sitting next to you and we listening to poetry and having conversations about like producing work that when people leave the room, they take it with them, right? So that it's, you know, it's not sort of, oh, that was great, close the door, move on, but that it's always churning. It's almost like something, a seed you're putting inside someone. So if you could say, you know, with this book, what is that thing you want people to carry away with them after reading it? Whether, you know, 1, 2 words, if it's a parrot, whatever the case may be, but what is that thing?
I guess it's that you're more than your weakest moment. You're more than most of us are more than whatever the little tiny thing is that we think we are. You're capable of more, so aim for more.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. I can't wait to you know, read 1 or 2 of the poems to Salon, but I can't wait till she can digest such powerful work. With that being said, I'm going to I completely messed up my agenda because I can talk to you for hours upon hours. I didn't realize how much I missed you until this, you know, us talking here. But I want to give you some time to take us through some of the poems in your book and share with you with the folks on the call.
Cool. And just talking about people doing poems that last, I have been in many rooms where people are saying your words back.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, I learned from the master.
Oh, God. No.
Cool. Do a few things. People are always asking, I guess we started with you describing me in some way and me kind of describing me in some way. So it feels like a good place to start. There's a poem in this called, "What Exactly Do You Want to Know?" Though flaunting dazzling royal blue necks, cassowaries prefer to keep a low profile. If provoked, they are capable of inflicting injury, sometimes fatal. The factory of my body works overtime. Ears, hands, shoulders, arms, skipping into willful service for the few who have taken the time to know me well. When a giant Himalayan lily pushes its stalk 13 feet high, sprouts stunning trumpets of flowers, only the gardener will remember the 7 years it took to bloom. The last time I found myself in the middle of an ocean, I swam until I remembered I couldn't swim. It has always been close to impossible, pinning myself into a box, asking others not to do the same. I'm gonna go back to the beginning of the book, the very first poem. This one is called "Faking Death to Avoid Sex Is Not Extreme." Look.
That was one of my favorites. That one I didn't read to Salon, by the way.
Yes, not time.
Not ever time.
Death is a mating ritual. The base of my wings hacked, a male seizing my body mid-flight. It's a vice, spiny claspers from a dragon hunter who doesn't care that his iron hold gouges my eyes, pierces my head, splits my chitin. This is a death I can come back from, only if I'm quick. Freeze mid-air, plunge to ground or vegetation, make a corpse of my body. Let the hunter hover for as long as it will take him to believe I have perished, or at least that I can not be coerced into being prey. Does it matter if I am always escaping? If I can't let myself be carefree? Sister Damselfly changed the rules, colluded with evolution to turn her green stripes blue to mimic the males, trick them away from harassment. It worked for a while. I may lose a limb in the fall, but if he ceases pursuit, do I not win? Is this not how we practice being strong? Breaking ourselves in pieces so we can choose the one fragment that stays whole. And that poem was initially about dragonflies and thanatosis and how female dragonflies pretend to die because the male dragonflies can kill them when they're too horny. But I remember reading that story in National Geographic when it came out, whenever it was, years ago, and thinking, oh, well, at least sometimes when the female dragonfly drops, the male dragonfly gets tired and goes away. How many times do I know of that, regardless of the fact that some, sorry, and I'm getting a little whatever here, but that's what the poem is.
It's all good. No, this the meat. This is what we want.
You know, how many experiences do we know of as women where it doesn't matter how dead you played, the person just kept doing what they wanted to do and there was no way out of it. And there was those parallels. So this is in many ways the female dragonfly speaking to the human woman about their experiences and what it is and relating that to strength. Yeah. You know, sometimes the jiu-jitsu doesn't work.
Look, yeah, you're giving us freedom. That's what you're doing. So just know that under all of this, you're giving us freedom. So I love it.
We all take risks stepping into thin air. My first night in Cayenne, I slept with a man I met at the airport, another teacher. His bed a hair's breadth from my misgivings. His only preoccupations were sleep and cheap accommodation. When he moved on, the bartender floated a drink to my room, cracked a joke, poured his tongue into my mouth, promised to return at 1 a.m., said I would discover him. Because I believed him, I barricaded the door, snuffed out the lights, and lay still until he tired of knocking.
Yes.
Because sometimes strength is just run. There are things you shouldn't bother to fight with. My mother says our relationship feels official is the next poem. 1. Her mind tells her she's loved me deeply. My eyes remain steady until she takes my hands, claps them together between her palms, and asks for keys to a love that doesn't feel like duty. She's asking to learn. I want to forget the pain enough to say something that absolves us both. I don't know what to say. 2. I felt naked each time when, scanning me head to toe, she would explain me to her guests, encourage me to be another girl, the daughter she wanted. Smile more, speak louder, be less blunt, more open, less naive, mingle like the others. How do you expect to make friends, attract men, be liked, be... All those times she looked at me and only saw what wasn't. Her eyes now dare to hold me hostage. 3, I am sorry. I'm sorry my love is not all limbs and giggles, that my smile is a slow bloom. I am sorry that I don't linger in crowded rooms, that my voice doesn't lend itself to high pitches, easy jokes, and the pheromone and lightness. You will find me in the silences between conversations. Short phrases drop in timely and heavy, a hail of awkwardness that cracks into unexpected laughter. There are people who draw life from this, for whom I am enough. 4, I love my mother. My mother loves me. We rarely speak the same language. And when I was writing this, it was important for me to also do some mother-daughter poems, whether or not I was speaking to my own mother. And I had to give her a disclaimer before she read the book to say, I know they're not all you, okay? Just go with it, right? But some of them have bits of her in it. And this title certainly was because she actually said that to me once. And if we're coming back to strength and thinking about strength, and you're thinking about a mother, a Nigerian parent, full stop, coming to you as the child to say something is not working in our relationship, how do I fix it? It doesn't happen often, but it's also something that I've learned from, because it's strength that allows you to be able to say, I don't know, teach me, or I may have been wrong. I want to listen now. And yeah. Center, I think I talked about this earlier, which is an amalgam of poems from lines from different people's poems who I like. And the epigraph is from Rilke, and it reads, here there is no place that doesn't see you. You are confronted with yourself each year, eyes like ripening fruit. The 38th year of my life, I had not expected to be an ordinary woman, plain as bread. Silence arrives like a servant to tidy things up. I had expected more. Such days when the sun's in a drawer and the drawer is locked. I have forgotten the why of everything. I sense an indifference larger than anything. I had expected more than this. I offer no apology. I will skip without your rope. Since you say I should not, I will create my own. They're poems that take ages to write in your head, but on the page they come out quick. And the next poem I'm going to read is called Things I Can't Say. If you have the book, Things I Can't Say Too. And for years I was trying to figure out the words to write that feeling you get, or at least I get. And I was speaking to a poet on a Zoom thing, to Vangi, at the beginning of the year, and she understood it. So I know there are a few of us. So it's that feeling you get when you're in a bath of really hot water and you just want to stay in the heat. Like there's something about it beyond just, oh, it's relaxing. There's something else. And that was kind of one of the things that was in my mind when I wrote this. And it's weird when we talk about editing, because it's the one thing that wasn't edited. And it's the shortest thing, because I wrote it and it just came back with a double tick to say, yeah, love this one. I was like, okay, cool. Things I can't say too. How do you ask to be crushed? To hold the weight of another on your chest till you can only breathe long and deep? How do you explain that your body must be forced to expel all its air, to let go, that you were too accustomed to leaning on solid things that break without warning, that you loved a man once and only knew this as truth the day your body leaned so fully into his chest. You could have been weightless, that you chased that feeling, the depth of that serenity, sometimes in a hot bath where the heat holds on until you surrender, sometimes under the weight of a fat man who doesn't love you, but has enough heft to force your body to let go. And I mentioned
the lines, the ending lines, they take you to a cliff and they drop you. And it's scary and exhilarating and fantastic all at the same time. Go ahead, I'm sorry, I just need to give it a little blurb. That little blurb.
Thank you. This is the poem I was talking about before, where I said it was something and I was told to write a 3-part, and I thought, no, I think I can do this in 2. I now have an idea of forming. I found home. I met a man who could have been any man, only he wasn't. What kind of absurdity makes one want to spend time learning an obscure language? He became fluent in me for the sake of it, invested enough time to decipher my laughter dialects, pure release, stuttered in warning, muddy or cluttered with doubt. He studied every detail, convinced he was reviving a city we could call home, came alive accumulating vocabulary, connecting them like puzzle patterns. When he said, "You are beautiful," it was deeper than high cheekbones, curved hips, soft moans, or compliments issued as one part of a bargain. If an acerbic tone caused him to stumble or consider walking away, he never did. Not really. How could he leave a home he worked so hard to restore? Questioning this and contemplating that, he stripped me down. Clothes, self-doubt, labels I held too close that weren't mine. At first, I fought the probing, the attention. I wasn't used to it. Didn't ask why he thought I was worth it. Couldn't challenge his conviction, didn't want to. How could I throw a brick through the walls we had restored together when I'd begun to believe? When at last I understood that being my own woman is a house I must build from scratch, must choose every brick, must reject most donations for, I started with what I knew. One morning, when a full moon tinted the ocean silver white, we marveled at its splendor. I caught him gazing at my face with the same awe. This isn't about him, but the way he loved me with no remorse was impressive. I wanted to love myself like that. I gave up the craft of busyness for its own sake, courted silence until I wasn't afraid to be still, to stare at my own face, my own body, beyond skin, and be confronted with shame I'd accepted without question. All the things they said a real woman was that I wasn't. The shame I owned for wanting to opine without apology, though not for empty attention. To love my own deep voice, the roundness in my face that no diet would shed. When the borrowed and donated things were as tangible as a false wall, I pulled them down. I now know where the floorboards creak. which doors are not good for access, which jarring paint I refuse to change, what it feels like to be at peace with myself, all of myself.
Exhale.
Yeah. And people always talk about love as a consuming thing sometimes. And I always think about it in a different way. I don't want something to consume me so that I don't know who I am. I want the kind of love, there's a particular kind of love that makes you look at yourself differently, that makes you want to see yourself in the way the other person sees you. And I think that kind of affirming love, and sometimes not affirming, that kind of challenging, provoking love, that questions why are you looking at yourself like that, less than you are, is the type that I'm always gunning for, I guess, and hoping to give to other people. What the girl wants. Neon pink nubuck leather high tops beckoned from the shop window, dripped their color into my wanted, enticed me inside the store. I slipped my feet into the plush leather. My toes breathed. I stood to walk and glided instead, reminiscing on younger days when shorts or the fanciest Sunday dress were matched with white high-top sneakers. Can't you see what the other girls are wearing? Said Mom. Don't you want to be pretty? I wanted to be comfortable, to loop white laces into an underhand knot, run without fear of stumbling. I left my heels on the shop floor. I never went back. Look, this was one of the gaps, one of the fill the gap poems when we were writing, because I can't remember what it was, but Jacob was like, no, you keep talking about this thing. There are things that people expect of you, which you're not living up to, and you've decided that is your life. So pick one, pick some piece of clothing. And anybody who knows me well knows that I'm probably almost always in trainers. And I must really love you to wear heels to your wedding. So that is kind of where that came from. I'm going to do another 2 and then, yeah. You had mentioned 14. Frankly, I'm running out of ways to fight for you, so I'm going to do that.
Yes.
Frankly, I am running out of ways to fight for you. If it wasn't him, it was someone like him. Promising luxury, spending your money for sport. He was no match for you. I affirmed your worth, tried. You preferred to dote on his blunders, as if you knew the love he promised was so unsteady, any critique was a threat to your dream of belonging. Is that why you couldn't leave? He held your heart with barbed wire, made you believe his barbs were a necessary test to prove you were worthy of him. He shuttled women to your bed, brandished their youth like a threat he knew would ignite your insecurities. Everyone but you could spot his lies easy. Only tarred section of a potholed highway. Love, he said, squeezing your face between his hands, and you tried to forget stupid, weak, the names he gave you. Aren't you tired? I held your trembling body in a park where once green leaves compliantly fell from their branches. A cycle of survival. Love yourself enough to walk away, I said, to survive him, but performing contentment despite the other women was sport, winnable, your whole self summoned as a formidable threat. If only you had the same audacity not to shrink for him, threaten his foothold. There were ways. I unpacked them, tried. A stack of compliments was all it took to deter you. One skewed spot to obscure your view. I refined your angle of sight. Wanted to believe it was enough to dismantle the persona you clung to, which wasn't him. But you concocted lies to feign blindness to the reasons you shouldn't love him, as if he wasn't a bed of nails your love laid on. Keenan, when his hurt stabbed your bones, I treated each wound until we broke your resolve to endure him. Crave external permission to acknowledge your own voice. I tried to revive your season of, this is who I am, take it or leave it. And didn't we reminisce on days when you'd sport red hair, blue lips, and a bald head, daring men to spot the difference between their fantasies and the real you? When I tried to make you blend, it was you who said they had to learn to love only the you they met or leave. Those days when you believed you deserved more, when the thought of lonely was not a threat that made you surrender sense to the nearest ogling man, him. When you demanded your card and keys at the spot where you met him, I need to learn to love me, you said. A dormant threat until then. I believed for you. Why abrade the scar before it heals? Cleave yet again to him. I tried. And speaking of good editors or edits, I remember the first version of that poem when Vivi was going to make me to revise it. She was trying to get to a question that I ask people when I'm editing a lot. Why did you write it? Which seems like a very standard question, right? But oftentimes your initial answer or your first two answers are not your answer. And this was this was one of those where I was like, because she's always going out with waste man and it's irritating.
No, dig deeper.
You know, dig deeper. Like, why does it matter to you? What is it about you? And it was only when I was able to find out what the answer to that was. Why did it hurt me? What did it say about how she valued me if I was only useful for picking this person up? That I was then able to, you know, restructure the poem. So my last one tonight is Museum of Women. And in a way it brings everything together, but it's also the poem that the publisher heard, a version of it, the first time we met. So it feels like a good way to end. Praise for the mothers, their love like an expensive scrub, scraping away what is dead and what needs to die, soothing the afterburn. Praise for the sisters who show up without needing to ask what is wrong, arms full of plantain, portable joy, who swathe your body before it can fall apart. Praise for the women who write books about women who challenge us to live beyond survival. For the girls whose stories incite renaissance. Praise for all the women who chorus groans when the truth is too heavy for words. Artists, quietly molding, mending, retouching me into a masterpiece, even when I don't yet acknowledge I am still under construction. If I ever said I made it this far alone, I lied. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You know, this is that for clapping. It's just amazing. So I don't have words. I mean, I have words, but they're going to be all gushy. So I'm just going to leave it as the work is amazing. This is just such a masterclass for folks. Thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for narrating your narration for us. It's beautiful. I want to, at some point, I'm going to give folks on the call a chance to ask questions, but this is my show, so do what I want to do. I will get there. No, because it's just, there's so much I want to, I know, right? It's my show. There's so much I want to, like I said, earlier on in the conversation, we could just sit here for hours and hours and chat for so many reasons, just because of the warmth you exude, but also the, I mentioned this before, like the deliberateness of your work and the time you put to construct things, you know what I mean? And there's so much, what for me at least comes out from reading through the book is I kept coming back to freedom, right? Mm-hmm. To freeing. And it just, in like anything else, you're always going to embrace things based off of where you are at the moment, right? And so it may be because of that, but so much freedom, so much exercising of freedom and finding space that sort of resonated with me with this book. So, if now I'm going to go through a couple questions. I have what I call my quick fire questions that I ask people. We'll get to that, but before that, if your book was an actor, who would that be?
The first person that came to my head was Viola Davis.
Ah, okay.
So I'm gonna stick with that. Yeah.
I like it. I like it. So, but why Viola?
I think just looking at her story, her acting, but her story, and both of them together, how she's able to merge that, like coming from nothing and just. I joke with people sometimes to say if there's a straight line, my life won't take it. And I should know that by now. And I feel like she's had that kind of experience, but she's brilliant at what she does. And the way she's able to she's able to switch around with that, super strength, super aggressive to the, the more violent characters when she can. I'm like, there'll be no issues with, she'll find her way around.
She'll find a way. It's a way to figure it out. Exactly. I love that. What would you say is your interesting writing quirk?
Oh, do I have one? Sugar, but is that a writing quirk or is that just?
It depends on how it's applied.
I procrastinate.
Procrastinate. I love it.
And when it's there and I've already had 6 of the muffins and I, and then I tell myself, what is your excuse now? But yeah, I like to have something sweet beside me as I write. And if possible, a big expanse of space. Okay. Like I feel like in the middle of greenery, if you're in a forest sometimes and you can just see space, that helps. But also I remember where I used to live in Manchester was a glass building, which I was on the 30th floor and you could see for miles. And there was something about the endlessness of what was around you that made me calm enough to write.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. Cool. So if you had a magic wand and you had one wish focused on the state of poetry today, what would that be?
That's a difficult question. I guess in a way, it's probably a wish that mirrors the world, that people will have real conversations, that we wouldn't just talk about what we're supposed to talk about because that's politically right now, and that people will really see people, not because you attended or you were part of this program or that program or got selected for whatever, so that people, you're not called just because I can use your fame to attach to something, but that people will actually see people, because there's a lot of good work out there that we don't get to hear because people are sidelining others in the name of they haven't yet reached whatever pinnacle, but you never open the door for them to get there. So
we've had many a conversation about that. Cool. You're in an elevator. You're stuck in an elevator, and you get to choose 3 people to be in there with for 20 minutes. Who are those 3 people and why?
20 minutes is a long time.
I
know. I've had this question before a very long time ago, and I remember Maya Angelou was one of my answers, because I just think she's really interesting. Although for 20 minutes she might whip my ass by the end of it, so I don't.
Well, there's 3 of them in there, so
so they'll be balanced.
You can spread it out.
But yeah, she's one. Jill Scott.
Why is that?
There's something she exudes. Some kind of self-knowing, world-knowing. I don't know. There's something some kind of realness that I want to, she's on my list of people I would like to interview one day.
Yeah.
So yeah, her. And the third person, Barry Jenkins. Just because I want to tap into the magic.
Okay.
I want to rub some of it off.
Right. Yeah. And let it come in. No, exactly. Squeeze me a couple times. Okay. Fantastic. Okay. You're in a slam competition. There's a slam competition, right? You're a judge. Who's gonna win between Ben Okri and Edgar Allan Poe?
Tshaka.
Just, okay. But I got a second part to the question. So I think I know who you think will win between those 2. All right. Now the second part of the question, and you have some slams where it's just a minute round, right? So it's not your 3-minute poetry, it's not your whole, but it's just 1 minute. Does that change the winner?
I guess it might. Because some people are quicker at,
Right.
Yeah, it might.
It might change. Okay. Yeah. All right. Fair enough. All right. So here are my quick fire questions, right? You got to, and for the audience, once I go through this, then I'll there's a couple of questions in the chat that we'll go through. But this is no preamble, right? I say the word, you tell me the first thing that comes to your mind. Okay. Starting. Poet.
Clive Francis.
Woman.
Maya Angelou.
God.
Jesus.
Black woman.
Shoot.
Latifah.
Latifah,
okay.
Queen Latifah.
There you go. Africa.
Nigeria.
Amanda Gorman.
Brave.
Okay, I like that. Metaphor.
Foundations.
Touch.
Say that again?
Touch.
Long time.
That is the best one yet. Okay. Next one is pain.
Mm. Yeah, I know this is supposed to be quick fire. I'm like, what did I
No,
think
it's
of?
all good. No, a quick fire in the presenting of it, but you know, it's your first thought.
Yeah. Something about work is coming to me, but that would take a long time to elaborate. So yeah.
Okay, work, that's good. BLM.
Statement of fact, yay.
Religion.
Good until people throw away their brain cells.
Vinegar.
Good for Brian.
There you go. All right. United Kingdom.
A place many people would like to escape in this moment.
Europe.
Say that again?
Europe.
Close, but not so close anymore.
Megan.
Mixed feelings.
Hip hop.
Have seen better days.
Kiss.
Say that again?
Kiss.
Ah. Yeah, we're going to.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So before I get, we jump into some of the questions from folks. Where and what is Tolu doing in 5 years? 5 years from now.
I'm hoping that I would have a bunch of plays out on rotation. I would have stepped into the screenwriting world. That I would have left. I was in Patricia Ellen Jones was speaking at this conference I was at the beginning of the week, and part of the things she read that were read as part of her bios were recovering attorney. And I thought, oh, and there were a few of us in the chat, and it seems there were quite a few of us who would like to be in the stage where we were recovering attorney as opposed to in it. Right. So yes, in 5 years, I'm hoping that I'm no longer in my in-law.
Gotcha. Oh, wow. Wonderful. So let me jump to a couple of questions that are in the chat. Jamila says, if you lose the love for poetry, what poem/poet makes you fall in love again?
There are two people I normally go to at the moment to remind myself how to write. Two people's books, Bybee Francis, Forest Primeval, or Almost Anything by Avon Jordan. So yeah.
Nice. Okay. There's another question here. Venus has a couple. I'm kind of going through them. Why did you become a lawyer?
The simple answer is at the point where people were making applications for uni, I hadn't put too much thought into it and I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do, but I had to make an application and I thought, oh, I'm good at arguing. And that was how I made my application. And yeah. Wow. It turns out that's a useful thing to have in this job.
You know, in this time, absolutely. And there's a couple here that she has that are pretty interesting. How do we get poets to write about human rights?
I think it needs, like with anything else, I think it needs to be attached with why you want to write about that human right, as opposed to human rights as a general thing. You will have a reason that attracts you or that calls you to a particular topic or theme, and if you attach it, you're writing to that thing as opposed to writing in generalities, then it will stick and it becomes more pertinent to you and more resonant for whoever is listening to it.
Makes sense. I always say, when folks ask, how you write so passionately, you write about stuff that you're passionate about. As simple as that, right?
Yeah.
What was the other question was that I like here was to tell me about your most transformative writing workshop with women.
With women.
With them.
I did a workshop at the South Bank must have been 2015, thereabouts. Conversations with my sisters is a thing that I do. So I did one of those, and huge crowd of women during the Women of the World Festival in a circle. And we were talking about mother-daughter relationships. And it's always weird when you're in a room with people you have never met. And I know you're facilitating, that's part of what it's there for, but people start to tell you really, really deep things that you would never know in a different, context. And people shared things, I had stuff so that you didn't, you could just write it down. Nobody needed to know where it was coming from.
Right.
But people shared things during that session. And I think the first version of that, my mother told me my relationship feels official. I remember reading it for the first time there. And that also then sparked things of people talking about their own experiences. And even afterwards, people who came to speak to me in private afterwards about things that they had kept, locked, that somehow unraveled. And I'm not going to take the credit for that, because I just, you just kind of get up and you facilitate, and it's more about timing and placement and that person being there. But that was transformative for them, obviously, but it was transformative for me, just as a reminder of what the words can do if you allow yourself to be in purpose. Yeah.
If you allow yourself to be in purpose. Yeah, I'm copywriting that one too, by the way. I do have a question, another question for you. You talked about the book and what you wanted to exude, and strength came up, womanhood came up. When I read it, I heard the freeing of the finding space. What would your sort of, I don't know if it's a recommendation, but how would you suggest male poets, male writers, sort of write about women, or write about, or do you, even, allow them to do so, right? Whatever, whether you want to call it struggles or whatever the subject matters that you're touching on, I give it a little caveat. I remember, I don't remember where this was, but I remember being at a show, and someone did a poem, and a young lady came up on stage and she said, I appreciate it, and it wasn't about the quality of the poem. It was just more around the idea that I appreciate you writing about this, but it's our job, right? And that was her take on it. So I'd love to get your interest in what you feel about it on a whole, and then any tips you could give for the writers and males on the phone when they, sort of endeavor into that.
I write about men, clearly. I there are a few of the poems, but I guess in the same way as if I'm writing about men, or if I'm writing about some demographic I don't know much about, I've got to be writing about my experience of the thing. It is the way I see it. There's a difference when I'm writing about what I think, not just what I think as opinion, but what I've experienced as a thing, what I know, than some of those. I remember, when we used to be on the poetry circuit together, you get young men come up and talk about women who ran too much, makeup and how it means these women don't feel for themselves. And I'm like, yeah, but how do you know?
You know. Yeah.
That is not something that you know. That is something that you've heard other people say, and now you're talking. Now, if you want to come and write about some girl who you know has struggles with X, Y, and Z, and this is why, without imposing yourself or a stereotype on the thing, that's a different thing altogether. And I think, you know, these conversations are always happening in writing circles, whether you're talking about other kinds of, you know, whether it's white writers writing about Black characters, or it's the same thing. And it'll be incredibly boring if we can only write about who we are. So I think you can write about other people. You just have to be careful so that you're not doing it. You're not trying to enforce a stereotype or whatever, that you're actually just being real, and that you're careful to censor yourself. It's kind of like the I don't know if you've seen it. There's a little Twitter storm roaring about, is it Kate Clancy, whatever her name is at the moment, with a book she wrote for the children who she not for, but about her experiences with the children who she teaches poetry. And she normally puts the poetry online, and the poetry is cool in that, but she's come for everyone in this thing, and she doesn't seem to think she has, you know, this person wasn't pretty even by Prue standards, this person had an Ashkenazi nose, this person had a and I'm like, that is not a way to write about other people, because you're sitting in a position of judgment. So it's the same thing here. If I'm a man writing about a woman, or a woman writing about a man, there's a difference when I'm sitting in a place of judgment and when I'm sitting in a place where I'm trying to understand. And and poetry is mostly, you're trying to answer the question that hasn't been asked, or the question that has, you know, that has been asked, but you don't quite know the answer to, and you write for that and towards that. So I'll say if you're doing that, then you're more likely to be on the right path than if you're just standing up to be prescriptive about what those women should do. How do you know?
Exactly. Love it. Love it. Okay. Jamila has another question. What version, I like this, what version of yourself, from an age perspective, would be most proud of who you are right now?
Oh. 20-something, thereabout, maybe, where she was still trying to figure herself out. Yeah.
And I'll jump off from that question is, so what is your, you know, to date, what's your crowning achievement? Doesn't have to be in writing or anything, just across the board. What do you feel is your crowning achievement so far?
I don't know.
That's honest. I love it.
Lots of things that I think I'm proud of, and I'm learning to enjoy the moment of the thing. For me, I mean, home sessions ended in 2019, but for me, that is still a huge achievement for me, that I was able to do that from nothing, because I know what it took out of me. So if I had to name one thing, maybe that. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And, you know, going back to that subject, all you had to do to get this done, like we said in your bio, right? Educator, poet, lawyer. We haven't touched a lot on that side of it. What aspects of that world have you brought over into into the world of your art? And has it been beneficial? Where has it been beneficial? Where has it not been?
I think they cross-pollinate. Because for me, I don't do money law. Maybe I should have, but I don't. I don't do money law. I do human rights law. So for me, it's about stories. Every time I'm going back to ask the government for more money for whoever they screwed over, I'm trying to tell a story to make them, to shame them into into coming around to my point of view. Every time I write a witness statement, I'm telling a story. I remember once, long time ago when I was still working in the Caribbean, and I had to do a closing to the jury for a case that I did. And then when I was hearing people talking about my closing later and comparing it to certain feedback I got in poetry, I then started to make links. Like, actually, people are saying the same things about when I'm on my feet there. So they do feed in, but thematically, as somebody asked the question about how do you make people write about human rights earlier, I guess I work around it all the time. And I stick it into compartments because that's the only way that I'm going to live with a lot of the things that I work with. But it seeps into the work. It has to. As an escape, I think there are a couple of poems in here about that experience of being a lawyer, or some of the experiences of being a lawyer. And also in terms of language, again, it's the cross-pollination. Poetry helps me to do certain things with language in law that I may not otherwise do, but law also helps me to look at language in a particular way. And in terms of the structure of things, generally to be more structured. Yeah. I think that's.
Well, we are coming to the close of our session here. I want to thank everyone who joined and who asked questions, who shared the space with us. Most of all, I want to thank you, Tolu, for giving us your time, giving us your wisdom, sharing your heart with us, being open to some of my ridiculous questions. I hope that this was as I guess I could keep going back to that word, freeing, as for me as it was for you, as it was for me, and I suspect some of our audience members as well. Guys, Tolu's her website, all that information is in the chat. Find her online. I say it again, find her online. If you can't find her, find me and I will help you find her online. One of the things I'm trying to bring to this show is not only people who do great work, but great people, and just at the core, and you are definitely that. So I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. I mean, this has been a lovely lovely evening for me, morning for you, but lovely evening for me, and to share and just to have people be part of that exchange. So it's been great.
Yeah. No, I miss you, and I will do better. I will do better. I absolutely will. So before we end, Mike, is there anything you want to share on behalf of Poetry Center San Jose?
Just that tomorrow night is the San Jose Poetry Slam with headliner Brian Franco. And that will be on this Zoom, on PCSJ's Zoom, probably not this link, but let me, you know what, I'm gonna find the Facebook link for that, but that is happening tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Sign up will be at 6:30. If anyone, 6:30 Pacific time, that is, because I have a funny feeling that a good portion of our audience is not in the United States. Very moment. Yeah. So if y'all want to get up at like 4 a.m, then by all
join.
Means, join us. Yeah. Other than that, we have the San Jose Poetry Festival coming up again, September 11th through the 19th, all also on Zoom. And there will be a number of workshops that are going to be held in the mornings of those weekends, as the festival will take place over 2 different weekends. So, but yeah, other than that, please follow us on all the social media, and you can find every bit of information you could need about PCSJ at pcsj.org. couldn't be any easier. And I'd also like to say this conversation was fantastic. I just sat quietly, just listening, like I was like I just wish there had been a campfire, but being in California, we have a big giant campfire in the sky right now. So thank you, Tolu, and thank you, Tshaka. I turn it back to you.
Oh, welcome. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Poetry Center San Jose. And the last thing I want to say is, you know, Tolu gave us food today, right? Take that, eat it, swallow it, digest it, and go out there and write and change the world. Yeah, we can do it. We said it. Think big, change the world. All right, guys, thank you so much. And we will be back next month. I will surprise you with who the next our next feature will be. But again, lastly, thank you so much, Tolu. And we will all be in spirit together. Bye, guys. See ya.